So it is the time of the year when people are getting the results of what schools they've been accepted to. And recently on the Arconnect forum, there's been actually a lot of posts about what schools people got into and where they should go. But one specific post, a person asked, I've been accepted to a whole bunch of places in California. Out of these schools, which one should I go to? And so we thought we would do a recording sort of answering that question. I mean, more talking about undergrad in a more broad sense, which might help people decide. And we've interviewed a number of the faculty members at these different schools, such as USC, UCLA, where else? Cal Poly SLO, and soon a few others. So if you're interested to know more about the kinds of people that goes to the schools and the current faculty leadership, you should check out our website, which is Midnight Charette, under guests, and you'll find the people on there. Yeah. Does it sound good? Yeah, you look sleepy, excited.
So excited.
So I think one of the big differences between schools is whether or not they're semester-based or quarter-based. A quarter-based system means that in the school year you have 3 quarters and the summer counts as the 4th. It's extremely fast-paced, super fast-paced.
That's what we had in France.
So what I had too at Cal Poly SLO, but not what I had in grad school. And it's radically different from semester, and those extra few weeks that the semester-based calendar gives you makes a huge difference in the kinds of projects you can do. The downside with the quarter system is that the quarters tend to be so short that the projects never get fully developed. Do you know what I mean? Whereas the semester...
except your thesis year.
Except your thesis year. In the semester program, those extra 3 weeks or whatever it is, in theory, gives the students the opportunity to have more complete projects. And that does happen. But quite frankly, what also happens is that the students won't produce more work with that quote unquote extra time. They'll just take longer to do work that kids in the quarter school will do in the same period of time.
I think I actually enjoyed the quarter system quite a bit because it was really framed in the time, like each week you had to get stuff done. Like the milestones were critical to get to the project.
Yes.
When you have too much time and it, maybe the studio or the project is not that structured on the milestones and you don't know how to handle that by yourself as a student, it could be a little overwhelming, and that's more risk for failure in a way.
The quarter system?
The semester system.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. The quarter system really forces you to be organized and get your shit done on time. And you're right, every single week counts. Every week counts. And it's if you miss too many weeks, then you're kind of fucked. So it forces you to be organized. It's like, sink or swim kind of deal. And the semester system allows a lot of students to kind of just float around because they have those extra weeks to do nothing.
The quarter system too, I think you could take it to like a routine workout, right? Like it's something that reappears regularly on a certain time schedule, and it just makes sure that everything keeps moving and training constantly. Like there is no room for a break. There is no room for being lost, or if you get lost, maybe it's just like 1 week and then you go back on track, right? Yeah. Which
I personally, so my background is my undergrad. It's from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, quarter system, 5 years of studio, which is different from some schools. And then my master's was a semester-based program. I like the semester-based program for masters because you're more developed and the projects are much more sophisticated and complicated, especially if you're doing urban design. The places, all the places I've taught for undergrad is a semester based. So I've seen both. I prefer the quarter based system. I think it's good for students to be forced to be organized, like we're talking about. I like the fact that it's fast paced, and I like the fact that you get more projects.
You get more projects for yourself to practice your creativity for your portfolio. Like let's say you ended up doing a project you didn't like or you didn't succeed. You have more to choose from when time comes to put materials together.
Absolutely. So that's the first big question between schools. Is it semester-based or quarter-based? The other thing to consider is the size of the school. This is significant, I would say, in choosing where you go. Cal Poly SLO is a big school. I think when I graduated, it was like 220 students in my class, which was kind of gargantuan. On the other end of the spectrum, I've had friends that went to MIT for undergrad. Their entire class was one studio, 12 students, starting first year. By the time they graduate, it drops down to 8. The same fucking 8 people for 5 years. Or is it 4 years? I forget, however many years, 4 or 5 years.
What?
Yeah.
No, don't do that to yourself.
Yeah. So MIT, right? Oh my God. MIT. I got into MIT, and I like the faculty that's there, which I don't know how you know because you're high school, you don't know anything about architecture, but you like that. You have to consider the fact that if it's that small of an institution, that greatly impacts your education and the exposure you have to different kinds of people and different kinds of ideas. I would go for bigger schools. I think it's a good thing to be exposed to a bunch of different people, a bunch of different faculties, and all different kinds of students from the ages, if you're from 18 to like 23. Because a big part of your undergrad education is not just architecture. It's about exposure to a bunch of things outside of architecture.
And it's not just coming out from you. It's coming from the people you meet, the people you work with, the people you co-work with, the teachers you have or you don't have. I think my school was probably, I don't remember, I think maybe we were, the first year we were 500 students, and by the time we finished 5th, maybe like 200 or less.
Jesus.
But you can stop after third year. You don't have to do
Right.
a 5th year program, 5-year program.
Mm-hmm.
But we had the ability to change studio every quarter.
Yeah.
So your level of exposure was demultiplied, right? And just by seeing other students work at every studio, this student comes from different places. They have different imagination, different understanding of things. Just that, it's just so rich. Right? That's how you develop yourself as a person, as a designer. It's by this exposure. And if it's that easily available to you, you don't really need to do anything. You just need to be there and absorb it.
Yes. Yeah.
Which, and you're paying like very high tuition for schools for 5 years. I think you kind of want as much as you can.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, a group of 8 to 12 students, it's great. You're going to make like your best friends, probably.
Or your fucking worst enemies. You're stuck with them for 5 years.
Like it's an expensive friendship that you're spending money into.
The other thing is, I think it's good to be thrown into the mix of like that mass group of people, because that breeds competition, hopefully in a positive way and not a negative way. But I think competition is essential. And I think being exposed to more different kinds of projects as a result of the different students helps you understand yourself as a designer. It just has to. It absolutely has to.
Well, and it trains you too for, jumping into working for offices. Like, if you've been in a big school with lots of people, lots of competition, you probably won't be as scared to apply to a large office and move around and try different things than if you're in a very confined, comfy bubble.
There is something about knowing how to navigate the waters when the waters are hundreds of people that are your colleagues that has an impact on your development as a productive human being that can produce things on time and be creative and be tenacious enough to beat out the competition. There's absolutely something to that. So I would tend to go for schools that are larger. I think probably the 200 persons a class is like the largest you're going to find, really, and I think it's good. The difference between Cal Poly SLO and Cal Poly Pomona, which is a question that might come up, this is only based on what I've heard from other people and kind of, I wouldn't say rumors, but opinions that I've heard, is that if you have the choice between the two, you go to Cal Poly SLO without a question. It's not even, just go to SLO. That would be my...
The scores ranking is also important to look at, I think. The other thing is accredited program versus non-accredited program.
I don't know if Pomona is accredited, but yes.
But that's a big part of your decision, right? I mean, if you get in a school that has a non-accredited program, then you're going to need to apply to another school when you're done. Yeah. Right? So you got to keep that in mind.
And I think most would agree with this. The consensus, if you get accepted to a 4-year program or a 5-year, I would do the 5-year. I think 4 years is short for an undergrad degree in architecture. 5 is about right. And then you can get licensed and et cetera, et cetera. I always felt bad for people who did a 4-year degree in architecture. It's like, fuck. Now you're an adult and now you have to go to another school and pay more money to get a master's.
That's
it's
something
crazy.
I don't understand. Like, we don't have that system in France. All the architecture schools are accredited. And that's something, unless there is a strong reason that makes you decide to go to a non-accredited school for your architecture degree, then go for it. But it doesn't sound like it's helping in any way.
I don't see the advantages. I would do a 5-year program if you have the choice, without a doubt. Unless maybe the 4-year programs is really well established and you really like it, and the 5-year program some kind of school that's not so well known and has shitty faculty, then that changes things. Which is the next point, which is faculty members. So when you get to the graduate level, you basically choose the grad school based on the specific teachers. We're not talking about grad schools, but that's what happens when you are at that level and you had 5 years or so of experience and you know what you want to do. You hunt out specific people and you don't care what school they're at. I'm looking for that person. That's tough to do, obviously, if you're 18 years old and you don't know anything about architecture, really. How do you know what kind of faculty? But I suppose you could do research, and one way is like if you find that the chair of the institution has been on a podcast, like this one, then you should listen to that podcast, and that would be a good insight. In schools, the chair, all of the upper administration, they have a big impact, right? But the chair or the director or there's another title that's common, the head of the department, these are all kind of the same people. Those are the ones that have a more interface with the students. So that's a person that you would want to listen to more, maybe. Like the dean has significant influence, but they deal with like really upper level stuff. But that as a student, if you really want to understand, what it's like to be in the school, more of a first person perspective, I would say the faculty members or the chair is a person to kind of research about and listen to, because they will have a more direct impact on the day-to-day stuff. Do you know what I mean? Kind of. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's a podcast, so if you don't say anything,
I'm thinking of the next thing already. You slow. The faculty and to me, a very good way to find out about the school too is to somehow reach out to the alumni who graduated from those schools. Mm-hmm. And I did that actually when I got accepted into grad school, to which I did not go to, but actually getting in touch with those alumni, you could ask them specific questions like, how do the semester or quarter works? Like, what types of project have you worked on? What do you think is the strength and maybe the weaknesses of the school? What are you doing now? Like, is the school helping you in any way? Do you have regrets? Like all kinds of things to kind of, gauge what you're about to jump into. And I was actually wondering, is it possible, I don't know by when you have to decide which school you want to attend, but maybe going to a 5th year thesis final show, if possible, could give you an idea of the types of projects maybe?
Probably not because of the timing, but they have open houses. So you go to the open house, and that's
definitely go to the open house.
That's how you get exposed. I mean, a big part of going to undergrad school is just the town it's in and the weather and all that kind of stuff. That has nothing to do with architecture. And that's just the architecture program. Like, these are things like, you don't want to go to some fucking state you don't want to be in and be in miserable winters if you hate the winters. Like, 5 years of your life, you don't want that.
Well, and if you know already what you're going to do after that. Like, I remember when I applied to school in France, I decided which one to go to, thinking, okay, if I ever live abroad, would the place I would be applying to would know where my school is.
Right.
And then that's why I went for the one in Paris, because I was like, everybody knows where Paris is. Yep. If you go to a school in New York, everyone knows where New York is. LA, same thing, right? If you go in the middle of fucking nowhere, people are going to be like, okay, great. Like, I never heard of that school. Like, the
name.
Judgment of value, of how valuable you are and your knowledge you know, is also
I
based
think
on
that's
that.
true, especially if you're dealing with international kind of applications and things like that, right? Because, like you said, everyone knows Paris, but whatever other school in France, like I would have not heard of. I think in the States there are the big name schools, and if you go with any of those, that kind of solves the issue of the name brand. But the interesting thing with architecture is it probably has to do more with your portfolio at a certain point. So if you do undergrad, Princeton, Cal Poly SLO, Columbia, USC maybe, sort of, MIT or Harvard, any of these big names, let's say, Cornell, I don't think one is going to help you significantly more than the other in terms of, again, the brand of the school. Unless the job you're going for happens to be run by a bunch of Cornell people who just hire Cornell people, which I seriously question if it's a good strategy.
That happens a lot, though.
Yeah, it's kind of bullshit.
Offices.
It's disgusting. But so the portfolio kind of trumps all of that if it's really good. So I would place emphasis and weight on the name of the school. That makes a difference for sure. But again, it depends on the audience, and the portfolio is going to be what matters.
That's why it's important to see, you know, what is kind of the specialty angle of the school, right? Is if the school is very artsy and that's what you want to go for, go there. If the school is very high tech in the term of the project design and you're interested in that, go there, you know.
Yeah, so let me give you, again, we're not experts at each of these schools, but I can tell you, based on our experience, roughly how these schools are perceived. USC is pretty middle of the road in terms of, artsy versus practical, you know, like, this is the kind of middle of the road. Cal Poly SLO is kind of middle. Cal Poly SLO is interesting because it's such a big school that you have a pretty wide variety of types of projects. And that also gets to how the whole entire program is structured, which we'll talk about. SciArc obviously is on the extreme end of the spectrum where they're much more experimental and stuff like that. If you know for sure that's the kind of thing you want to do, fine, go there. The issue with going to a school that is that specific is that after you graduate, what is that you're going to do? And your portfolio will be made up of SciArc kind of work. What value is that to an office if you're trying to do let's say more normal practical buildings? It might be kind of a turnoff. This is not to say you shouldn't go to SARC if you want to do that eventually, because
you have to be aware of it.
You're young and you can maneuver around and change offices and build your career after your school, but you should be aware of it. And the reputation for graduates that come from these more experimental and forward-thinking institutions, for a lot of offices, it's like, I can't hire those people. They don't know anything, and it's not useful for me. I'm not saying it's good or bad one way or the other, but there's something to keep in mind. So and this is, again, goes back to the fact that I think it's really hard to say to oneself at the age of 17, I know what I want to be in 5 years from now. That's a crazy thing to say. And this is why I also think that just going to a school and staying there for 5 years, and that's now has determined the direction of your life, likely, is also absurd. So I kind of would prefer to go to a place that allows me to be a little more flexible when I graduate, and a school that's going to be much more encompassing of different ideas. That way I can find my way during those 5 years and I'm not pigeonholed from day one.
Yeah, you say. So you're saying like a school that has some kind of signature approach throughout all semesters, all studio.
Throughout all the 5 years.
Right, versus a schools that has multiple languages of studios and projects and teachers.
I would tend to go with the latter, because I think it's a shame to again, pigeonhole yourself from day one when you don't know anything about the profession. You're limiting yourself before you even started, in a way. Now, the counter argument to that is that when you go to a school that has a greater variety, that means that none of those each specific approaches to architecture they're not experts enough, or there's not enough of them in that community to have it be really more profound. You know what I mean? Kind of. Which I understand abstractly, but that's difficult to say unless you know the specific faculty members that are there in that specific order or semester. But again, it's undergrad from 17 to 23, and you're so young that if you want to become an expert in one thing afterwards, that's what master's is for, right?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So this also gets back to whether or not these schools, are they only for architecture, or are they only for architecture plus planning? Or is it a university, a proper university like UCLA or USC or something where you have everything else in the world at this campus? I think it's better, especially if you're straight out of high school, to go to a university that has all these different programs. I've thought about this quite a bit. And again, your growth as a person from during that age period is not to do just with acquiring knowledge about architecture. It's crazy to think that that is the most important thing. My own experience was that the courses I took outside of architecture were extremely influential in my thinking in general as a human being, and also for my architecture. So I'm a big advocate, 100%, for going to a university that offers a variety of different types of courses and general education.
And actually, I think that's one of the, it could be a strength and it could become a weakness to have access to so many other fields that you can study to. In France, it doesn't work that way, right? You pick a school and that's it. Like I can study psychology in architecture school because the school is only about architecture.
Right.
Which the beauty of being in university in the US is that you can be in architecture and study sciences or study other things, and whatever minor you might be registering into might strongly influence the main field of focus that you selected.
Focus, yeah.
Right?
Yep.
No, and then the crossover and like the chemistry that those two fields combined can create is endless, and it's.
That's where the magic happens. That's where something interesting happens.
And it's like a teamwork with somebody from a different field. Like you could really come up with like new ideas, new things. I think it's amazing. The only danger with that is that maybe you're not as focused on architecture as you should be.
More that you get just distracted by stuff.
Right? You get distracted by other things. Or, if you're kind of an undecisive person or passionate person about learning about everything, then you kind of lose track and just like start scattering everywhere.
But see, here's the thing though. Like, are you going to undergrad school to find your passion? Maybe you think you already know what it is, but really to find your passion and realize that this is what you want to do and become successful and make a difference in the world? Or are you going to become an architect? You should be going to undergrad school for the first thing, regardless of what that fucking is. You think it's architecture now, but 5 years, that's a long time. I mean, if you're 17 years old, think about where you were when you were 12 years old, right? 12 to 17. You were just entering or in the middle of middle school, let's say. Compare yourself from then until where you are now as a person who just graduated high school. You're a different human being, biologically also. The same thing is going to happen, well, maybe not biologically so much, depending on how you do things. The same thing's going to happen when you finish undergrad school. So while I appreciate the hardcore dedication the architecture community has to studying architecture and learning architecture and being really good at it, yes, but if we're talking to an 18-year-old, no, the first thing you should do is find what you're passionate in. And if you think it's architecture, that's great. But God, it would be a waste to not have the chance to be exposed to all these other things at that age.
No, I think you're completely right. I mean, it's not easy and clear for everyone, right? To know what you want to commit your life to. And you're right. I mean, if you're going to spend like thousands of dollars a year to be in one spot, then at least give yourself all of the chances and all the doors available before you have to pick one. And if you have to switch paths and change major, it's not architecture, it is a better time to do it while you're at school than after you graduated, started working, having rent, mortgages, and all that stuff.
100%.
You're in the middle of it.
It's the perfect time to do it. That's the great thing about universities is that you get exposed to all this stuff, and it's like a quicker way of living. It's a quicker way to get to learn about these different things, so you can realize like, philosophy is not my thing, physics not my thing, engineering not my thing, architecture is my thing, or some inverse thereof, right? And that's hard to do when you get out into the real world, because when else are you going to be able to take a class about philosophy or take a class about physics or astronomy or dance or whatever? You just don't get that opportunity.
And then you need to go back to school to get another degree. That means you just wasted 5 years of money in something you're not going to use, right? So my opinion about undergrad is actually it's first and foremost about deciding what you want to do once you get in. Even if that school makes you declare your major at day one, you're still trying to figure it out. That's the point of going to school after high school. And I think also on the points of, picking a school that's focusing on one field versus a university that offers a whole bunch of them.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the exposure to the people who are there.
Yeah.
Do you want to be surrounded only by architects, or do you want to be surrounded by people who do all kinds of things and have possibilities to meet and learn about all kinds of things, right? And this is also the time where you build up friendship and, without being too strategical, network and connection for the future, right?
Yeah. Yeah, this is true. And architects don't make clients for architects.
Architects don't have problems meeting other architects. Like that's oftentimes, that is the problem, is that we only hang out with architects. But being open to other types of professions and people, I think, is super important.
The other thing too is some of the most creative and famous and successful people in any profession, but let's say architecture specifically, are ones who have hybrid experiences or hybrid knowledge. You know what I mean? Again, that's where the magic happens, when you take two things that don't belong together and you see how they can speak with each other. So if you accept that to be the case, right, then it would probably be good to be exposed to other things. And if you look at the way the world is progressing anyway, with professions and the hybridization of different kinds of professions, everyone is kind of dabbling in different things now. That's the way, right? That's what we understand to be the case. The person that has the overall larger vision to understand how different things can interact to create a new startup or new product, new something. This is where we're heading. And it tends to be now away from hyper focus on one thing, just in my community, that community that has been established by, the people before me. So
and your brain can become as big as you expose it to be, right?
Yeah.
So the more things you're exposing your brain to, the bigger your brain is going to be.
Haven't you noticed that also, that they're really successful people, when they talk about their thing, they talk about it through the lens of other professions or through the lens of other types of endeavors and other types of creative activities. They understand the world in a multifaceted way. And this is the power of going to university and taking that philosophy. I keep saying philosophy because I'm thinking of a specific course that I took, or environmental psychology class, right? Like, all these things will inform you as a person, again, and inform the architecture. And it's also a mistake that architects make, where they hyper-focus on architecture, let's say the building itself. But if we, in the broadest sense, understand our profession and the things we create to be at the intersection of many different aspects of society, it's political, it's social, it's philosophical, it's architectural, it's scientific, it's environmental, it's all these things. This is like understood and accepted by everyone that's an architect. We get it. Well, then maybe you should understand these things and go to classes about all these things and not just study things about architects. And also, if you go to a school where there's only architects and they are claiming to study these things, well, you're still studying it through the lens of an architect. No, go directly to the people that study these things.
That's why another thing I would add to, how to decide on the school you want to go to, if you're interested in the broader exposure, is, does the school offer exchange program? And then there is, can I afford it? Can I not afford it? That's like another big part of it. But I would recommend like a million times to anyone in any major, in any field of study, to go out of your comfort zone, go out of where you're from, and go see what's out there. Like, I cannot even imagine if I never did my exchange program, what my life would be right now.
Right.
It's just...
You would probably be speaking French right now.
I'd probably be living in Paris and, working at the same firm I did an internship at while I was in school, and that would be my life. With, an understanding that would be much more limited, and an exposure and a creativity that would be shrunken down,
Yeah, you'd probably be eating more cheese, less rice.
Definitely. No, but it's you have the support system of a school, and being able to live in another country for a short period, even if it's a quarter, a semester, 2 weeks over the summer, like anything that could give you a taste of what is on the other side of the world, I think it's an amazing thing. Yeah. So
That's a good point.
And you don't have to decide, from the first year if that's something you're going to do or not, but knowing that you have the option or you don't have the option, I think is important.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to start becoming a transfer student, going from one university to the other. It's become more complicated. It's less stable for your life as a student, as a creative, as everything. It's complicated.
Yeah, transferring is tough. It's tough on the person. I've never seen a transfer student who didn't look more worn down because of the transfer process. Going briefly back though, you were talking about getting to know the faculty members, and we're kind of talking about getting to know the curriculum of the school, of the architecture program itself. So we've, because of my teaching background and my interest in it, we've interviewed a number of academics and teachers. Some of them are just teachers. Some of them were formerly chairs, assistant deans, and yada, yada, yada. There seems to be a trend now, based on what we've heard, that a lot of architecture schools are heading toward a curriculum that is much more structured, much more prescriptive, as opposed to a curriculum that's more open-ended and that allows students to kind of get lost, fail, and come up with their own ideas. The issue I have with this kind of approach is that I think it's very easy for the human mind to shut off the creative side of the brain and to just follow the instructions that the professor has given them or follow the assignment, right? And at the end of the day, when you graduate and if you're trying to do your own designs, you won't have anyone telling you to take this spoon, mirror it a million times, and then make an object out of it, or to study this building and split it in half and then make your own building. That's just not going to happen. You have to be able to think on your own. So I'm saying all this is that if you look at the curriculum and the kind of work that's coming from the institution, and it looks amazing, it's well executed, but it's all the same. Like, it's a school of 200 students and all 200 projects look kind of the same. I would be kind of concerned about this. Is that school prioritizing innovation and creative thinking and freedom of thinking, or are they prioritizing stuff that's well executed but fits within a very tightly and narrowly defined understanding of architecture? This is the big question to me in education. And as an undergrad student, I would tend to go toward, me as a person, would go toward a place that allows me more freedom rather than one where I'm going to produce amazing stuff. It's almost guaranteed I'm going to produce amazing stuff because the curriculum forces me to do that as long as I do the work. I don't want that. I want to go to the place where I have freedom. I don't know how difficult that is for a high school person to understand what I'm saying, but this is my thing. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, it's probably difficult for them to understand in society that everything is appreciated based on how it looks.
I don't know how you judge that.
But the thing you can develop, your own graphic skills throughout the 5 years being in school. You shouldn't pick a school because of graphically the types of project that comes out of it. Like, what comes out of the school is where you're gonna make it, right?
Right. Again, I think it's the sameness. I mean, so assuming someone doesn't know anything about architecture, but if you go to the website and all the second-year projects all look the same, they're all beautiful black and white drawings on Mylar, and they're all angled shit.
I'll just throw up all over the computer.
Well, then I don't know. Maybe by second year's early on, but certainly by get to third, fourth year, like everyone should be producing different kinds of work.
That pisses me.
I'm telling you, it paralyzes people, paralyzes the designers when they're told what to do year after year after year. At the end of the day, when they graduate, are they a designer? Can they think on their own? No, they can't. They're just good producers.
Well, and the problem too is that, then when you're looking for a job and you send your portfolio just looks like 100 and another 100 of them.
It's all the same.
Like, it pisses me off whenever I go to school for like final show or like, final review or whatever. And I glance at the projects in the room and I'm like, it all looks the same. I'm like, the teacher was really good on telling students how to do it exactly its or her way because it all looks identical.
Yeah.
It's kind of a talent to be able to make people do that, but to me, school is the place where you develop yourself.
Yeah.
as a unique individual, and not where you're trying to replicate things with the same techniques 100 million times. Like, there is computer and machinery that can do that now. We don't need a human with, defects and particularities to produce that. That's not the point.
And I think that the danger with giving, how do I say this?
And the other thing too is that school is kind of its own world, right? It's about you and what you create. When you come out of school and you start working for an actual architecture office, it's not really about you. It's about the office, the project, the client. And whatever beautiful things you learn how to make in school might not necessarily please the eye of the client or your boss. So it doesn't mean because it looks beautiful when you graduate that this is going to be of any use in the professional world. And the ability to be able to juggle around with different styles and different things and be comfortable with doing that is much closer to what the real world of architecture is about than perfecting one technique for 5 years.
Yeah, I was looking at a portfolio recently, and typically in all the portfolios I've made and the ones I've seen, when you have a spread that shows a project, right, 2 pages that shows a project, you try to communicate the idea of the project. That's like the thing you're trying to do, and how to communicate the idea, big image, efficient text, clear text, all that kind of stuff. But if the project has nothing to do with a creative idea and it's just to do with execution of an assignment, then it becomes a different strategy for laying out the portfolio and for communicating the work. So I think it's having really a nice work is always good. It shows a proficiency and skill set. But I think what you want to gain from your undergrad experience for you as a human being more than anything else, but and also applying for work, is to show that you know how to think creatively and you can think on your own. Because again, that's what the offices want.
That's and I think also that's kind of the big difference between art and architecture, is that art is about the techniques, the approach, like kind of the object without necessarily having to provide a narrative for people to enjoy it or see it or. But architecture, it's more than art. It has a lot more stuff that needs to happen to exist. So, yeah. No, but I did both schools. I did art school to apply to architecture school in France because of the way it works in France. And art school is really about knowing all the techniques. Knowing to use charcoal versus oil paint versus pigment versus ceramic versus photography, like all of the medium. They're teaching you about, the medium and how to express yourself or what you're trying to represent using those different types of mediums and techniques, right? It's not about, did I pick the right angle? Is it like, am I showing the sequence of things or like, how does it fit within the context? It's not, it's a much closer look on things, right? When architecture is just like, you look out and you zoom in, you zoom out and you zoom in like constantly. So your ability to express that needs to be there and needs to happen in multiple different ways than just a nice graphic.
Yeah. And, a 5-year program, if you're studious, you're going to learn the skill set. I don't want to make it sound like, because we're kind of comparing these two different types of schools, I don't want to make it sound like if you go to the school where it's not, where their curriculum is not prescribed, that you're not going to learn skills. You will learn skills just by doing it. I mean, that's the other thing about an architecture education. 90% of education is just you doing work, being at the desk, doing work and scratching your head and trying to figure out what we're supposed to be doing and producing stuff. That's also the great benefit. And the amazing thing about it is you could go to the best school in the world, but if you're a lazy fuck, it's not going to work for you. So that's what I have to say with the curriculum. The other thing to keep in mind is whether or not is the total number of projects you're going to have to do, which we kind of talked about. But this is going back to the quarter system and 5-year program. And like I said, at certain schools, every single quarter or semester is a design project. So that means thesis years is one project. So that's 4, 12, that's 13. Is my math right? Yeah, 13 different design projects you do over the course of 5 years, assuming the final year is one big project. 13 projects. versus, let's say, a semester program, 4 years where design studio starts in the second year. That is 6 projects. That's less than half.
Better be good.
Think about that. That's wild, right?
Yeah, it's
And,
insane.
you know, when you're just starting out, you're going to fuck up a couple projects. You have a couple projects you won't complete, a couple that just don't make sense. You completed, but you hate them. It's going to take a few, right? I cannot imagine having gone through undergrad with only 6 chances to do projects. Nuts. So I would keep that in mind as well. So then it comes to 5th year, and this is a big question. You point out during 4th year or whatever year, whether or not you study abroad, that's a good thing, and it's a good thing to keep out for. What am I saying? To look out for. The other thing is what happens during 5th year. Different schools take 5th year, take the approach to 5th year differently. Some of them have what's called a capstone project, which is typically for the entire year, but it's less about you really defining what architecture means, which is what we would call a thesis. It's more about executing a project really well and doing like a more full set of drawings, right? Whereas a thesis project is more conceptual, we could say, and more about you defining your ideas about architecture. And the emphasis is a little bit less on making sure you complete all the different types of drawings and all the different types of renderings and things like this. Again, as probably no surprise, my preference would be to go to a school that gives you that kind of freedom in your 5th year to think about things on your own.
Well, especially if the rest of your 4th year were a quarter-based project, you know, actually have the luxury of time to spend 1 year on one project and develop it the way you think it should be developed.
Time, but also think about this, like every class you take will be with a specific instructor. So every project you do from years 1 to 4 is going to be based on that teacher in some way, because they're either, at the very least, they're going to give you a program. This semester, we're doing a homeless shelter. I don't want to do homeless shelter. That's too fucking bad. You're doing a homeless shelter. Or it's going to be, again, very tightly outlined by the syllabus that's might be across the entire year. So all the 3rd year studios, even if there's 4 studios, all of them are doing the same exact project, the same syllabus, same everything, right? So everything you do is going to be framed within that class. Now, some teachers are going to give you more flexibility. The most flexibility you'll get is, again, you have a homeless shelter, here's a site, but you can do anything you want. The most prescriptive will be like, here's specific assignments you have to do to execute this thing. What this means is that when you get to 5th year, that might be your only opportunity to do a project that you want to do. And hopefully you're the type of student who is self-motivated and has your own thoughts, and you haven't slacked off to when you get to that point, you're like, yeah, I have these interests. I want to do a project that focuses on restaurants or I don't know, whatever. And I haven't had that chance to do that because every semester, everyone's telling me what to do. I want to do this. If you think that might be you, then you want to go to a school where they're going to give you that kind of freedom in 5th year. It is infuriating to be a student when you have your passions and your interests and you can't execute those during normal school hours. And you have to try and do it in addition to school, which is really difficult to do. So I just can't imagine having gotten to 5th year from my experience, and someone said, okay, we're doing a capstone project, you're doing a restaurant. Fuck that. I have no interest in doing a restaurant.
Yeah, it was 5th year for me was a nice conclusion of the 4th year, for 4 years I had of schooling. And kind of like, how do I put everything I've learned and put in place in previous project together in that final one? And I'm making up the rules, and it's not easy.
Not easy. It's
not easy, but if you have good teachers, I was lucky that my studio had 3, and there were 3 of them very good. So, you know, like the level of
Le ménage à trois.
Of feedbacks. No, but the level of feedbacks, I cannot personally imagine having one teacher for 5th year.
That's interesting.
I think having, you know, like their different understanding of what I was trying to do without giving me specific directions, but more like general guidance was so precious that it really helped me out.
You know, the danger, of course, is, so let's say we're going to compare capstone versus thesis. As parallel to the other things we were saying, with capstone, you're more likely to execute a really good project. But with thesis, you're going to be allowed to explore things on your own, but the chance of failure is way fucking higher. Doing thesis and so in thesis would be like, you have an idea, you actually figure out your own program, you determine your own site, perhaps even, you write a thesis, and you do the project. That is really difficult to do. Really difficult to do. But
it's very difficult in the same time, exposing yourself to struggle and failure and tough time is almost should be mandatory within, your 5 years of training, because you need to learn how to deal with that. And out of that will come a technique, a routine, a strategy that you will put in place. So when next time comes around, you know how to approach it. If you follow another project in your 5th year and then you start working for an office and you're stuck, then what do? You don't know how to deal with that.
It's not even about offices, it's about just the
your design
general
process or anything,
Your general understanding of yourself as a human being and the work that you're going to do on your own after you graduate. And that safety net needs to disappear at some point in time. You've got to fail at some point in your undergraduate career. That's the best thing you can do, is fail at some point. If you're failing all the time, that's probably an issue, but you should fail a couple of times. It's essential. And the question is, are you prioritizing skill set, or are you prioritizing thinking? I would be the first to say that my thesis project was a complete catastrophe, total failure in execution, complete utter amazing failure, also partly because I broke my foot like 2 weeks before.
Excuses. You don't need a foot to draw.
Hey, it's a very hilly town. No, a complete failure, but I learned more in that year about myself and about the kinds of work I'm interested in and my design skills and where I'm at as a designer and my interests and everything else than I would have if I didn't have that opportunity to completely fall flat on my face. And and I'll tell you what, schools don't like doing it that way because it doesn't look good. And people don't like saying that, people don't like thinking, but that's the fucking truth. I mean, schools advertise to people who fund them, they advertise to students, they advertise to faculty members and everyone else, to the rest of the world, based on how good they look, how good their work looks.
Which just says
allowing
bullshit.
Failure doesn't help that cause. That's why they're becoming more prescriptive, because they look fucking good that way. And to the general public, they don't know if it's about failure or ideas and thesis.
But it's still bullshit, because even if the work is shit, students are still going to graduate.
Yeah,
like that's the difference with France, is that if your work is shit at the end of 5th year, well, you're not going to graduate. You're going to do another round of 5th year.
Yeah.
So
France is tough.
I mean, even if you fail, a worst case scenario, the project doesn't look like a project at the end of the 5th year, but you're still going to graduate. So
this is in the United States mostly, yeah.
So I would say just take the risk of make something of your own for the last year and see how it goes.
What else is there to say, really?
I think it's time for a snack.
Time for a snack. The only other thing I can think of is just consider the town or the city that the place is located in. One common thing I hear is that going to a school that's more isolated that's a negative because you're far away from being like in the mix of cities and buildings and construction, stuff like that. But I don't fucking just get in a car and drive to the city that's nearby. It's not an issue. And everything's on the internet now. Just look on the internet. I don't think it's a problem.
It depends. Isolation could be positive if you want to focus and not be distracted. It could also be less of an exposure of other things, like urban living and lifestyle and other things that are going on. And same with being in New York or in Paris, for example. Like it's extremely distracting. But at the same time, there's so much there that you could just walk places and have access to a ton of physical example of what architecture or urbanism or whatever you name it is. So
can imagine doing undergrad in New York City. Like at the new school, let's say Union Square, I would have fucking died from alcoholism. It's insane.
The thing too is that your experience as a student in those places is way different than like your experience as a person working there. Yeah. So
wild times.
You can make yourself isolated in the biggest city in the world, and you can get out of the most isolated place. So
the other thing I was thinking about, I almost forgot, is the type of student population. When you go to a private school that's really expensive, you're going to be surrounded by students that generally have more money than a community college, right? These are generalizations, but when you're surrounded by students who have less money and they're going to the school because it's cheaper, and a lot of them are working to pay for housing and to pay for tuition, that is a different breed of human being. The kind of tenacity and aggressiveness and the fierceness they have about their education and doing well it's different than a student who's wearing fucking Louis Vuitton outfits and tracksuits to studio at a private institution. They're different kinds of people, and that does affect the work, and that does affect the kind of community and the kind of competition that exists, right? There's a tenacity about students who realize the value of the education in terms of money and understand what's at stake. Those are different kinds of people, and they generally tend to be more dedicated to the work from what I've seen. So this is something else to keep in mind, I think.
Well, and the truth is that whenever you come out of school and you're looking for jobs, the pay rate is pretty much the same for everybody. So you're going to spend more money in a school, but you make the same amount of salary for your first job as somebody who did not go to a private school.
That's actually a really, really good point. Yeah.
Was it worth it?
Yeah. Yeah, architecture is a funny thing because it's not like the name necessarily means a whole lot because of the portfolio and because of what you just said when you graduate. Oh, you went to Princeton? I'm going to pay you more money? Nope.
No,
does not work that way.
No.
All right. Is anything else? Anything else?
No, now you got to make a decision. It's
all right,
you.
everyone. Good luck with making decisions. Please subscribe and leave us a review.
Please.
I see you out there. You're on YouTube right now. Or actually, no, this won't be announced on YouTube. You're on your phone. Then open up the app and leave a review. It would be super appreciated to help us, continue forward and spread the word, which also spread the word. Let all your friends know. Don't let the enemies know, but let the friends know about this podcast. And of course, reach out to us if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, and we'll do our best to get back to you. We're on all the social media platforms, to find us there. There's a Facebook group, so if you're posting on there and asking questions, then you could do that, and maybe it'll go somewhere, maybe not, I don't know.
I'm the only one asking questions on that group, so help would be truly appreciated because it just looks like it's me talking to myself.
And stay tuned for more tips and tactics episodes. Go to midnightcharette.com where all of our previous episodes are on there and they are categorized. So if you're looking for more tips and tactics about how to get jobs, how to apply, or what schools to go to, etc., then go to that tab and you will find it. And that's it.
Yep.
Right. Thanks everyone for listening, and we will talk to you again soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.